Darshan Maharaja, thank you so much for joining me once again today. I want to get into this with you because you've been covering the situation about immigration here in Canada quite extensively for some time. A lot of people riding your coattails, it seems, at this point because it's become such a big issue here in Canada. And I want to congratulate you for all the hard work that you've been doing. And again, thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me again. Actually, I have to be grateful to you for giving this major issue the amount of time that you are giving. I saw your chat with Lauren Southern also, and it was a great chat, very objective, not getting emotional, not getting ideological, just talking plain facts and logic. That was a great chat.
Well, that's where I fear that this conversation is heading because people are filling themselves with emotions. Obviously, we're heading into an economic downturn, a big economic downturn. We're not heading into it. We're well on the
Get
slope
there.
and we're picking up speed, but we're getting there because of economic woes that we've had, but they're exacerbated by this unfettered immigration that we've been experiencing over the past several years now, and it's really coming to a culmination of a lot of serious issues happening all at the same time. Now people are getting heated up, and then when that heats up, people start complaining and they look for scapegoats. They look for other things to throw their blame at. And this is a great article you brought to my attention. Sorry, I'll put this up on both of our screens here. Blatant racism, even though I was born and raised here, what do I do? This is on the Canada Housing 2 Reddit. This subreddit has been filled with a lot of really good information, actually. If you want to, it's not just about housing anymore. It's about immigration. It's about a lot of these cultural issues that we're suffering. But just to read a little bit of it, let me preface this by saying I hate the immigration situation and what it's caused. My parents came here in the 80s from India, worked hard, and never veered off path, paid their taxes, kept their heads down, and raised a family of two doctors and one current law student. I feel they did everything right, worked hard, and contributed. Both of them are proud Canadians. Watch the Leafs game. Okay, he goes on and on. He goes on about how Canadian him and his family are, and which really illustrates the point. We have a lot of real Canadian people, and they're suffering from this scapegoating, this idea that while there is unfettered immigration coming from a particular part of India at the moment in a number of provinces, the backlash is turning against Indo-Canadians that have been here for a long time and who have assimilated. They've completely adapted to Canadian culture, and for the large part, it seems that Indo-Canadians seem to be one of the biggest groups against this unfettered immigration. Can you tell me more about this?
Yeah, you see, what's happening is, as you said, people are aiming their anger at the community rather than the people who caused this, namely the
Mm-hmm.
government, the colleges, the employers who are bringing in hundreds of thousands of temporary foreign workers. We'll get into more detail on that. But instead of aiming their anger at the people who caused the mess, they are finding a scapegoat in the community. Now, that is not to say that everyone is squeaky clean on this. The people, business owners who are selling their LMIAs, we have spoken about that, labor
Mm-hmm.
market impact assessment to employ foreign workers.
For
There
those that
are
don't know
people
what that
fighting.
is, it's basically a visa that's tied to a workplace so that you can stay in Canada as long as you're working for that one employer, which a lot of them are being sold to these employees at exorbitant amounts of money illegally, and then holding them as indentured servants. And this is crazy, this situation.
Yeah, and basically it purports to show that there is no local candidate available for this job. Therefore, we are
Mm-hmm.
hiring a foreigner, and that is going to cause. It is already causing a lot of anger among people, and it's going to cause even more anger because as summer progresses and people with kids who are in their teens or nearing 20, they are looking for a summer job to save up for their college or whatever. They are unable to get the job because the job has been sold to a foreign national who paid for it 40,000, $50,000, just so they can get a shot at gaining permanent residency in Canada. So
Hmm.
there are problems on both sides, but let's talk about the people who are angry for the moment. uh, they are, as you said, aiming their anger at the community, which is the wrong way to go about it. uh, and Mainly the problem is that the intake now is substantially unfiltered. You have seen so many international students have been charged with criminal offenses, including one assassination, right? So,
Yes.
and at that time, Immigration Minister Miller was asked whether there is a criminal background check, and he said, yes, there is, which was completely false. There isn't. And then he tried to show as to how he meant it. We check biometrics and this and that, but biometrics would exist in the database of Canadian law enforcement only if the person had been to Canada before and got in legal trouble. You know, then they would have some kind of a biometrics recorded. Other than that,
Hmm.
there is no criminal background check. So previously, what used to happen was our intake of immigrants was mainly via what is the official immigration stream, and there are still all sorts of checks, and it used to consist of well-educated people for the large part, married with maybe a kid or two. So you are looking at a completely different demographic
So what you're
of
saying is I hate to sound like Kathy Griffin here, but, or Kathy Newman, but to understand you correctly, there's essentially a split in the Indo-Canadian community of people who have been here for ages, and then people who came over on the previous run of immigration, or the way immigration used to be, where you'd have to be a skilled person, someone who has a education, someone with a lot, tick all the boxes, family oriented, all these other things that we would want in our communities. And so that's the way that went. And then with this new run of immigration, this unfettered immigration, large numbers of people unchecked. Obviously, there's criminals in every society around the world, and we're opening the door for even those from these individuals that are coming over at the time being. And you've shared with me some of the things here on. On this, and I can't show everything here. Actually, I can't even show the video because we're on YouTube and there's violence occurring in the video. But it's obviously, what some people are calling unemployed behavior, the type of behavior that people who aren't law-abiding citizens are doing in Canada. And then there's other situations such as this case here, man arrested for I can't even say the words, doing bad things to women at a water park. Over 12 victims on that day alone. But this is where we're at. So we're seeing a clear dichotomy in even the Indo-Canadian community. And can you even say that this is even part of the Indo-Canadian community at this point? Like it's a completely different demographic we're talking about.
Yeah, see, we used to go for the best and the brightest. And people came here, the situation was not perfect for them, but they persevered, they worked hard, they established themselves, and they take pride in having integrated well in the Canadian society. Now, on the other hand, you have all this unfettered intake where they have no intention of integrating. They are continuing to behave the way they might have been behaving back in the place of origin. They are getting into all sorts of crime also. Here in Brampton, I see regularly, in auto thefts and in armed robberies and in extortion of business people, and they are of the same ethnic community. Extortion, those things have blown up in terms of percentages. So my I was talking about this with another YouTuber who produces content in Punjabi, and
Mm-hmm.
I told him that we used to be seen as the model minority until 4 years ago.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
wherever these guys go, they become productive members of the society. They contribute. They are, for the large part, well educated. Now the impression has completely flipped, and I fight this battle every day on Twitter, where people are putting all the blame on India, saying this is all sorts of bad language for India. But I ask them one simple question, which is, why is it that Indians don't have this impression in the United States, which is right across the border, where they are still the model minority?
Right, right. I hadn't considered that. So people in the United States, because there's not this unfettered immigration from particular regions of I don't know why it's everyone's coming from. It seems Punjab, but they don't have the same issue in the United States, which is crazy. But what I see though is I see people who already, maybe even before didn't like Indians in Canada because they were jealous of their success, and now they don't like Indians because they're angry about the criminality. And it's more of a, are you putting the cart before the horse here? Like, some people are just genuinely don't like outsiders, and that's the way that is. And I've seen people piggybacking off of your hard work to do this, and piggybacking off of Lauren Southern's hard work. So I wanted to share this because this is something that came up recently. It was on Twitter, and this was some user saying, "Yeah, we're always ahead of you, and we're hated for it. This clown will be calling for mass deportations." While he swears he isn't a racist. I'm not going to be calling for mass deport. Be busy with editing on this one because
Yeah, it
my
froze.
internet just skipped. Yeah, I wanted to showcase this one because we were talking about this privately after I posted this one out here, and I drew my line in the sand here. Is I'm against this immigration. I'm against this like mass immigration, but I'm not anti-immigrant. And I'm saying to these people, I haven't come around to your position. In fact, you're stealing from other people's valid criticisms and then adding a racial element. The line in the sand is when you call for a white-only Canada and state that Indian people can't integrate within Canada because of some racial genetic disposition, which I disagree with. I don't think that that's an accurate way of looking at even the world or just anthropology. People tend to, conform to the society that they live in, and this is the reality of the situation. And a lot of people typically that have come to Canada in small numbers, and they came because they wanted the free life that Canada has to offer. Now is a different story. It's not the same as multiculturalism. It's not the same as this idea of the melting pot. We're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people from one particular area on the planet coming over. And it's just a recipe for disaster. It can't work out.
Yeah, and you see, there is this nagging question which nobody has posed, let alone answered, which is that you look at the US and the CEOs of the biggest corporations in the world are Indian. I was in California about a decade ago and talking to someone who works in the IT industry there, and he said that the joke here is that IBM stands for Indian Business Machines because there are so many
Right.
Indians working there,
There's so
right?
many.
You look at any particular spelling bee contest, the winner will be an Indian kid.
Is it just because there's so many Indian kids out there?
Yeah,
Why is that?
the community is known for academic achievement, corporate excellence, working in professional fields like medicine. They are doctors, they are neurosurgeons, and all those. Even their kids are
I guess I'm
outshining
catching on
everyone.
here. So I'm
Sorry.
catching on here. Like this, the Thomas Sowell wrote about this a bunch about the hatred of Jewish people, and jealousy for them doing well, and then conspiracy theories that come around because they're doing so well. But you look at where Jewish people are when they've moved to different countries. They moved in times when they were kind of like an intermediary race, even in times where there was racism, segregation, that kind of thing, and they were in industrious, and they have a religion that revolves around education and bettering themselves and always pushing forward with their education. It's if you just went on that alone, you'd say, oh well, that's just a recipe for success. And so Thomas Sowell's estimate of this whole idea in a few of his writings that I've read about it was, if you have that, it's just a no-brainer that these people are going to do well. So there shouldn't breed animosity. If anything, it should be, well, why don't we mimic that? That's probably a good way of looking forward, is to say, hey, that's the way to do it. Let's try some of that.
Yeah, but the question is this: why is the US getting that cohort from India and not Canada? Why
Well,
doesn't
it would
Canada
obviously
get
be
that
because
cohort?
of policy.
So I keep telling them that it's not about what kind of a country the place of origin is, but rather it's about what kind of a country, what kind of people Canada attracts, which means what kind of a country Canada is. Now, if you look
Hmm.
at the broader economy, totally unproductive activities are the most remunerative. And this is a recent development, although that element is always there in any country, any economy. But now it has grown to a point where, if you are a normal, straightforward, hardworking person, even as a professional, you will not have it as good as the grifters and the rent seekers
Hmm.
and the scammers. We have spoken about how the colleges are scamming everyone in India, bringing them over, and the owners are like making out like bandits.
Hmm.
So, unproductive activity is rewarded far more than productive activity in Canada of today. That is why Canada attracts unproductive people.
Well, that's pretty straightforward. I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
yeah, if we don't attract productive people, we attract unproductive people. We'll get more of that. That's an economic law. If you subsidize something, you'll get more of it, and if you put limits on something, you'll find shortages. But so yeah. So what's our way out of this? I know that there's no political will at the moment. In fact, there's political will in the other direction. There's this concept of a 100 million person Canada that a think tank thought up in Ottawa, and they're trying to push it forward with their crony insiders in the Trudeau administration. We've been hearing about this lately, and more lately as things have been going on. But it looks like they have these, just like any other utopian fantasy moving forward. It really is just that. They push forward with, maybe one or two of the implementations of it. They haven't brought about more work or more industry or any of the things that they said that they were going to bring along, but they have brought along the numbers of immigrants coming in the country. And well, they aren't like we used to expect from our immigrants, because they've just, again, unfettered and opened the door. What is there any political will to, or I know there's not political, is there any way we can get ourselves out of this situation?
See, this, first of all, the mess has been created because of central planning. Nobody has made this point, but someone, a think tank sitting here at a table and deciding how many people Canada should have is central planning. How
Yeah.
many people end up living in Canada should depend on forces of nature. The way the economy is going, how many people find Canada attractive, the growth of industry, etc. Like nobody sat down to decide that X number of people will live in Silicon Valley.
No, that's a
It
really
happened.
good point, actually.
It
Because
happened
why did
organically
everyone go to California at one point? Well, it was because
because
it
it
was
was worth,
booming.
right? Or even in previous waves, there was a gold rush. So
Yeah.
people went there, right? It was worth going there. So this, they've just got started on implementing their central planning, and you see the amount of trouble they have created. So if they get to implement their vision, and this should have been clear, it's only in hindsight that you understand certain things. For example, after Justin Trudeau won his first election, and Navdeep Bains was made innovation minister, and his portfolio was so vaguely defined that he was called the minister of everything, because he could walk into any department. Like, so his first report, which was lauded in the political circles, saying, hey, this is a great report, He said that Canada should increase immigration intake from 350,000 to 500,000.
And
So,
what reason did he give for it?
so, this was the first shot fired by the Century Initiative, which is the think
Right.
tank that dreamed up the 100 million number. At that
Mm-hmm.
point, I had two questions. One, um, we are already at 350,000. So, how does doing more of the same count as innovation?
Yeah, it's not innovation. That's
Right?
just
And
more.
secondly,
It's
we
turning the
have
taps
an
up.
yeah, and secondly, we have an immigration minister. So why are you, trading on his turf? So these questions were not asked. We did not realize what was afoot. Now, with hindsight, we can see that this was the push from Century Initiative towards their goal of 100 million people in Canada. The way you can get out of this mess, it is extremely dangerous, because the only way is not to renew the temporary visas of the workers and the students, and then they have to go back. But if they
Mm-hmm.
don't, then the government will have to get active and deport them. And the moment that starts, I don't think, given how angry people are, the government will be able to control that process. You don't want vigilantism,
No.
right? You don't want that, but it may happen. So this is, I mean, it's an extremely dangerous situation right now, where either you let them stay, and then the problems multiply or at least compound, and the other way is you force them to go back, and then you have social unrest unfolding.
Well, I don't see it as forcing people to go back when they came over with the on under the premise that they were temporary. Whether or not they thought that they were promised by somebody else that you can renew and then stay forever. That's not our fault. It's not the fault of the Canadian taxpayer. It's not the fault of the Canadian community to say that, well, somebody promised you could stay, so okay, I guess you could stay. No, it's you signed temporary visa, and it says the stipulation on it is very clear. After this much time, you go home or try to renew. And if there is no renewal available, then it's sorry, but thanks for coming. Here's the thing that I because everyone, there's a lot of bleeding hearts out there. There's a lot of people that are like, that's sad, it's really awful. But it's sad when because we all know that there's Indian scammers from India. We've all heard the stories, and
Hmm.
it's very sad when old elderly people in Canada or in America, they get scammed by some scammer and
Hmm.
they lose a bunch of money. Well, there's no contingency on the taxpayer to refund them their money.
Hmm.
And just like that, there's no contingency on the taxpayer to guarantee a home for people who have been scammed by people in Punjab to come over to Canada and then scammed by some crooked sham university above a massage parlor. And this is the thing. We shouldn't, as taxpayers, as citizens of this country, be on the hook for that. And I don't see it as a mass deportation. I see it as a mass. Sorry, you mass came in on temporary status, and that temporary status is running out.
No, no, there is a practical difficulty here. In fact, two. One is that while this scamming is done by someone in India, and while the government policy clearly states that permanent residency is not guaranteed, I believe there is a wink wink nudge nudge agreement between the powers that be and the illegal operators. That is
Hmm.
number one. Number two, despite signing all the papers saying that they will go back when their visa is over, you have seen international students protesting to extend their stay.
Well, yeah, in Prince Edward Island, this is
No,
what's
no,
been
that
making
was
headlines right now.
that was the second one. The first one took place in Manitoba, where
Oh, is that right?
6,700 students who were protesting to extend their work permits, they were granted the extension. So
Hence the
precedent
protest
was
is
set.
right.
The precedent was set. when the students started protesting in Prince Edward Island, the local MP from Charlottetown wrote to the premier of PEI saying, all sorts of things justifying that their permits should be extended, including that we have to meet our population targets. Like, are you
Right.
are you crazy or something? In the last, I think, 2 years, the or 4 years, the population of the island increased by 18,000. The
It's a
population of
tiny island.
Yeah,
For people who don't
but
know, it's
but
very
listen,
small.
listen, listen. The population of the island increased by 18,000. The population of people who don't have a family doctor increased by 24,000.
That's unreal.
Yeah, it hit me. I wrote an article on that because I said, "Hey, this is bonkers. How
Well, how
can
does that happen?
the number of people not having a family doctor be 33% higher than the growth in population?" And here there is this MP. I mean, I'm trying to control myself here. I don't want to throw any epithets out, but
Oh yeah, well, you're doing
he's
well,
saying we have to meet
Darshan.
our population targets. What population? What are the other targets? Like, should there be a home for people to live in? Should there be a doctor for them to go to? Should there be a library or a recreation center? Having a, a human settlement in modern day Canada is attached to so many other demands that are put on infrastructure. You cannot chase one target at the expense of everything else. So that is protest number two. It is still ongoing. It had fizzled out. Now it has kick-started again. My hypothesis is that they are getting some kind of political backing.
So there. Oh, okay. So
The
there's some
the
sort
MP,
of
yeah,
funding behind it.
or at least some kind of moral backing, saying, "Hey, continue. We'll get you the extension." Right? There
Wow,
was
it's raising a lot of stink, especially on social media. People are
Yes.
seeing the footage of this, and they're saying no. And as it gets more and more attention, I mean, I believe that there are more level-headed Canadians out there than there are not level-headed Canadians. And the more people learn about these things, because it's a big propaganda machine, and they'll tell them some false narrative, but people are turning more and more to alternative media. They're turning to other sources where people can get real information. People who are reporting on these stories like yourself, and this is why I do my best to give platform to this stuff, because this is the real information, and the more people, level-headed people, learn about it, they say no, like that's just ludicrous. You can't grant extensions to these people. They've made their stay, and now it's time to go. That's it.
Now there was a third protest in Brampton, where there is some kind of an organization here called Naujawana Support Network. Naujawana means youth, so
Mm-hmm.
youth support network. And there are times when they do really good work. For example, all these kids, they work for employers from their own ethnic community, and then there is wage theft. They are not paid, and then this network, they will put pressure on the employer to pay the wages. And but here they have jumped in, saying that 70,000 temporary work permit holders are their permits are expiring by the end of 2025, and they must be renewed. That happened in Brampton. Now there is
Did you say
another
75,000?
70,000.
Oh, 70,000. So
70,000,
that's a lot of people.
yeah. Those work permits are expiring by the end of 2025, and they must be renewed. So they are holding rallies and things like that. Now there is another protest in Winnipeg. So we are looking at four total protests, one of which was granted. The first one that set a terrible precedent. Now these guys are not going to give up. So looping back to your point, expecting that people will live when their duration of their visa is over may be optimistic. They
Mm.
came here with the determination to gain permanent residency, and they are going to try everything that they can to gain it.
Well, yeah, of course, including political protests, which is funny because it's granted to citizens of the country, which is yeah, okay, they're not citizens, but nonetheless, they're protesting. But has there been any pushback on this? Is there any counter protest, or I know I've seen what people are saying online, but I haven't seen anything in the streets, anything like that.
No, there was something planned on Canada Day in various cities, but I don't think it has resonated as much, or maybe it wasn't covered by the media, whatever the case. But counter protest is not going to work. It's because,
Oh, it'll just be a clash, in my
yeah,
opinion.
it will just lead to a clash and ugly situation. See, the
Hmm.
foundational error was letting so many people in with the hope that they will become permanent residents.
Right.
Like, we have temporary workers in the agriculture sector, mainly from Latin America. They
Yeah,
come
and they're
every
great.
year.
They're great. I've met so many of them in different regions that I've traveled in Canada. Fantastic people, very typically family oriented people, just spending a little bit of time away from their families to earn a bit of extra cash and go back home.
Yeah, I see them here, even in Brampton. There are places like a raspberry farm or a strawberry farm, and I go
Hmm.
there, on pick your own days, and I see them. The same guys will come to the same farm every year. They are here for maybe 5 months, from April to October or thereabouts, and they make some extra cash, but they are not interested in staying here.
No, no,
For them,
their families are back home.
home is in Peru, or whichever Latin American country they have come from. So they are not interested. These guys came here with the specific expectation that they will be able to get permanent residency. So they are not going to leave voluntarily. So that's going to be a problem. I have, I think I've written or made a podcast about that, saying this is going to be the challenge for the next government, assuming Conservative Party of Canada wins. This is going to be their challenge, because first of all, we twisted our definition of diversity to mean more Indians. That's not
That's not
the case.
diverse.
Diversity does not mean more Indians; it means more kinds of people.
Yeah.
So that
Or even more kinds of Indians. India's a big place with a lot of different cultures and different things. It seems
yeah,
that we're getting mostly from the what is it, the Punjab region?
Punjab, yes, Punjab and
Okay.
Gujarat, Punjab and Gujarat. Although now I am seeing some international students from the southern state of Kerala, uh, but those are few. But yeah, mainly our intake is from Punjab and Gujarat. I stumbled on a YouTube channel recently, in recent days, about the lost recipes of India, and where those guys are showing recipes that they are completely from a different universe for me, whereas I was
Oh,
born and brought up in India, right? There are, and even not lost recipes, things that are commonly eaten in various places of India will be completely alien to other people. So there is a
right.
mind boggling diversity there. You can, if you want to be sensible about it, you can bring different kinds of people from the same country. But the whole thing was, the policy got hijacked by financial interests of colleges, of consultants, and whoever else. So there was no check, and I see a lot of people make this sensible argument that we should have a percentage cap on each country for our, either international students or immigrants or foreign workers or whatever. There should be
Mhm.
a cap of how many people can come from one country, which is true. I agree.
Yeah, that's a fair estimate to look at that, and if things need to be adjusted in the future, I mean, we can always keep that open ended and make adjustments. But having the lion's share of people coming from one place is, I mean, again, I think it's a recipe for disaster, especially when we're not bringing in people on the basis of they're educated, they have families. We're bringing in young people who have no education that are coming here on the auspices of either getting an education or scamming fake education just to get permanent residency. And I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that that's not going to work out. It's not going to be great, but it is a lucrative opportunity, as Mark Miller said it at one point. These
Yeah,
are lucrative assets,
yeah.
and this is the sad part: is that when it comes to the corporate world, the top ends of government, the bureaucracy, they look at people as numbers, as numbers in their pocketbook. Even they don't really look at people as like people who have to live out their lives, and then also join and form communities here where they land. But they see them as numbers, and it's sickening.
No, and beyond the numbers, you see, you have to be mindful of the fact that these people have come here to be successful in their lives,
Hmm.
right? I'll give you an example. Um, some years ago, I was discussing something. I was sitting down with a bunch of Indian students at University of Toronto. They were in computer studies, and we started discussing Terminator 3, the movie.
Okay, it
Okay.
was terrible, by the way.
Well, in hindsight, not so much. But at the time, even I thought it was like not like T1 and T2. But now I think it is decent movie. But anyway, we were discussing T3, and then the kids got into a serious discussion as to whether Skynet can actually become self-aware. What kind of programming would be needed? Now, not necessary that all those were workable ideas. Probably they weren't, but this was the direction of their thinking.
Hmm.
Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, most of these students wouldn't know what Skynet is. They haven't seen an
Hmm.
English movie, at least not one that wasn't dubbed. They haven't seen an English movie in
Right.
English, right? So, for them, their world consists of completely different things, like, Punjabi rap music, and they'll blast it out from their cars. They take pride in buying a muscle car and then driving around. There's a plaza here right across Sheridan College, where they used to continuously, raise so much ruckus that ultimately the plaza guys put a gate on their entrances, and the gate is closed at night and then padlocked.
Well,
Now,
speaking of other interests that people have coming from India, there's one set of interests that have been alarming for a lot of Canadians as of late, as we learn more about it, and that's the Khalistani movement. So in India, the Khalistani movement is seen as a terrorist organization. Am I correct on that? But
yes.
Canada seems to be the largest, even including India. Canada has more Khalistanis than the country of India at this point. Is this a hotbed for that? What's the story there?
No, you see, in India, Khalistan movement is more or less over. There are still remnants of that. One of them actually got elected as member of parliament in the recent election in May. He got elected. But otherwise, the movement is over. It used to be at its peak in the 80s and early 90s, but that movement is over. But what happens is when they come here, because at the peak of the movement, a lot of Sikhs had come to Canada, to get away from it.
Hmm.
As maybe as refugees officially, or at least taking refuge in Canada so that they were not targeted by the Indian government in India. So they
Hmm.
have set up base here. They have found a lot of political patronage also for the last 40 years plus. So there is a thriving Khalistan movement here, as there is in the UK as well, and it's now starting off in US and Australia also. But it's a complicated thing. We'll need much more time to discuss that, because there are some who were not Khalistanis when they were in Punjab, but when they come over here, they fall in that, they are in that circle, in that kind of an environment. So they may start
Right.
believing that there should be a separate country called Khalistan. It's a complicated issue. But
I always saw it weird. Like I thought it weird because I come from Scottish heritage. My mother's from Scotland, but it would be really weird to have like the William Wallace movement in Canada, right? Because if you want Scottish independence, sorry, you might want to go over to Scotland to do that. I always just thought of it as a strange thing to have such a large movement for that here.
no, but the thing is this: whether they are pushing for Khalistan or not in Canada, think back to 10 years ago when there was that huge fire in Fort McMurray.
Hmm.
And CBC covered this. I think other MSM also covered this, which is that the Sikh community in British Columbia and Alberta, etc., uh, they dropped whatever they were doing and they went on a drive to collect stuff because the whole town had burned. They needed everything from toothbrush to everything else. So they collected all that from their donations, and then the Sikhs who were in the trucking business, they loaded up their trucks and went to all the relief centers where the people had been given shelter.
Hmm.
That Now think of the average Canadian's impression of an Indo-Canadian at that point, and then think about now
Very
when
different.
I see a lot of people saying all Indians will be deported. Some are saying that no matter how many generations you've been here, you will be deported. That
Well,
Canada
that's
is
just nonsense,
meant
though.
for.
Really, at the end of the day, those are radical, extreme views, in my opinion.
But 10 years ago, they couldn't have dared to say this. Today,
It's
the
very true.
environment has been created where they find it possible to say this. There is room in the arena of public debates, and that is because a completely out of control immigration policy. Those guys are the same. At this point, I'm not looking at Khalistani or not Khalistani, right?
Hmm.
I'm looking at people who were praised for helping Canadians, and today they are despised. They are the same people,
Yeah.
right?
And well, a lot of those people were at the Freedom Convoy with everybody else. And I personally believe that the Freedom Convoy was a big issue for the political class in Canada for one specific reason. It spanned every race, creed, color, everything. It was all about the government overreaching on something and all of these people coming together in one voice saying the same thing, enough. And that was terrifying for the government because they were trying to implement some drastic measures against a free people, and these free people stood up, and it didn't matter. They weren't able to break them up into groups at that point. They were one people, and that's an admiration. That's something admirable. That's something to look at as a point in Canadian history that we can aspire to and become again. And I've always looked at it that way because as much as the media wants to label like freedom convoy people as racists or whatever, it was everybody was there, and including Indian people and European people and people who've been in Canada, native people. They were all here. It was amazing.
Now, think of this from the point of view of a strategist who has nefarious intention, because that was a moment of unity, right?
Hmm.
How do you break that unity? So,
Divide people up.
2022 February, you are talking about, right?
Hmm. That's right.
2022 April, there used to be something called a trigger, which means that if the unemployment rate exceeds 6%, then no foreign work permits for foreigners will be issued. There was an automatic trigger
Oh, I didn't know this.
that if there is, yeah, even I didn't know until recently. Someone dug it up. A friend of mine, a guy lives in Vancouver. He dug it up. He said that this trigger was removed in April 2022. So
Wow.
theoretically, your unemployment rate can be 25%, and that will still not stop an employer from getting a worker from abroad.
Wow.
That was
Wow.
that was in April 2022. Then in May 2022, and I have spoken about this extensively. Motion M44. Look it up. It says that the government should provide permanent residency pathways for temporary foreign workers, including international students, which means that international students were now being seen as a subset of temporary foreign workers, not as students.
Not as students at all.
Now, this motion passed unanimously by a vote of 324 to 0. So, every parliamentarian is answerable for this. What were you thinking at that time? Because in February, end of January and February is when you have the Freedom Convoy, where the unity of Canadians is the most shining aspect of it. Then in April, the trigger gets removed. In May, the permanent residency pathway is thrown open to people of all skill levels. That is also what the motion says. And now you have sown the seeds by which that unity will be destroyed. And today, 2 years later, we are seeing it destroyed because
Yeah,
people
that's
are at
right.
each other's throats. You know, when there was a rally against gender education in schools here in GTA, a
Hmm.
lot of people were saying that we are, standing shoulder to shoulder with our Muslim sisters. Okay, then the October 7 happens, and now the same people can't see eye to eye with their Muslim
Yeah.
sisters.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Every time we unite on something, they just find some miraculous way
Hmm.
to get everybody to hate each other. Obviously, what happened on October 7th was absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
But what it did was it created an environment where political activists could hijack that and then turn it into a divisive issue. And that's what I found in my researching of this situation.
But consider the amount of long rope that these protests have got from the political class. Because even when they are, demonstrating in a residential neighborhood because a lot of Jews live there, you can validly step in and saying, "Hey, this is off limits. People are living here; they have nothing to do with what's going on over there. Just
Hmm.
because they are Jew, you cannot be here protesting, right?" So the kind of long rope that has been given, this was kind of, I'm not saying that this was planned in Canada because it happened over there, but after it happened, it has been utilized. But for the large part, a lot of Canadians have become against people of Indian origin, whether they have been here for multiple generations or not. And the instrumentality by which it has been brought about are these two changes: removal of the trigger and motion M44. After that, you see the numbers have exploded. And when you bring in that kind of imbalance, it's bound to create a backlash. We are now seeing the backlash.
Well, and I think this is where people need to keep a clear, level head about this,
Hmm.
and look at the facts, look at what's actually happening. Remember to only a couple of years ago how we, we have many Indian members of our communities all over the place, and all of a sudden, yeah, why are we blaming people around us? We all know who to blame. It's the government that is to blame for this. Let's not turn our focus on each other because that's exactly what they would like out of us. Darshan, you've been doing such amazing work online on Twitter, publishing on your website. It's fantastic. I want to encourage everybody who's out there listening to this and watching today to go out. Where can people find you?
My website is darshanmaharaja.ca. On Twitter, I am Theophanes Rex, that is Theophanesrex. And on YouTube, I'm Darshan Maharaja. You can find me there.
Perfect. I'm going to make sure that all the links for this are in the description down below. Go over, check out what he's been saying. There's lots of good things, and there's a positive outlook on this one. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. We can get together with our neighbors and we can move past this, because this is really just another episode in the story of what Canada is and always will be moving forward. Thank you so much, Darshan, for joining me today.
Thank you, Clyde. Thank you.